You know, when you hear about Lee Kuan Yew, people always throw around titles like the Sage of Singapore. But does that really fit? It sounds a little too soft, right? Like some guy handing out gentle advice from a mountaintop. The man who built Singapore was anything but gentle. He was the ultimate realist, a force of will who built a first world powerhouse on a foundation of some really uncomfortable, even brutal truths. So let's explore the foundations of his worldview. And boom, there it is. That's his starting point. Not some fancy theory about democracy or economics, no. It all starts with this really stark belief about what people are really like. This quote, it's the absolute bedrock of his entire worldview. And he was convinced it's a truth the West just chooses to ignore. We like to think we've moved past our base instincts, right? Well, Lee Kuan Yew, he fundamentally absolutely disagreed.
So this right here, this really frames the core conflict, doesn't it? Lee Kuan Yew, or LKY as he was called, just didn't waste time on how the world should be. He was totally, ruthlessly obsessed with the world as it is. You see, in the West, we often start with these big ideas, right? Ideals, universal rights, democracy. LKY, he started with power, instinct, order. And that fundamental difference, that's what we're going to dig into.
All right. So that brings us to his first big truth. And let me tell you, it's maybe his most controversial one. This one goes right for the jugular of a core belief we hold in the West. So he just flat out rejected the whole premise of the American Declaration of Independence. I mean, think about that. It's not that he didn't respect America's creativity or anything, but the idea that all men are created equal, he saw that as a huge destabilizing problem if you take it as a literal biological fact instead of, a nice goal to shoot for. He really came at this from a biological point of view. I mean, look around in nature, right? Nothing is ever truly equal. He believed that if you take any group of people, any group of babies, a tiny percentage are going to be exceptionally capable. And it's those people, the near geniuses as he called them, who end up driving society forward. And for him, this wasn't some moral judgment. It was just a fact of life, like gravity. And this just shows you the huge philosophical gap, right? In the West, we generally believe that nurture can beat nature, that with the right education, the right environment, you can make anyone into anything. LKY? Nope. He believed a person's core hardware, their temperament, their drive, their raw talent, is basically set from the start. You can install better software with training, sure, but you can't change the hardware. And this wasn't just some theory he talked about. Oh no, he literally built his entire country on this idea. His strategy? He called it headhunting. He set up a system with one goal: find the smartest, most capable people in Singapore and put them in charge. Because he believed a nation is only ever as good as its best people. Okay, on to his second brutal truth. And this one, well, he didn't learn this at some fancy university like Cambridge. This was forged in the absolute chaos and fire of war. What happened during World War II, he said it himself, it was the single biggest political education of his life. I mean, imagine watching the invincible British Empire just crumble in a matter of weeks. And then you're living under a Japanese occupation that doesn't care about laws. They rule through sheer raw brutality. That experience taught him a lesson that was burned into his mind forever. And what was that lesson? It was that civilization is unbelievably fragile. Order, society, all the things we take for granted, that's not our natural state. It's just a thin crust on top of a volcano of human chaos. And if you're not willing to fight to keep that crust in place, that volcano is going to blow. And that's why he completely flipped the script on a common Western idea. We always talk about the rule of law. He insisted it had to be order and law. His point was, look, without a stable society, without someone strong enough to enforce order, all those nice ideas like rights and justice, they're meaningless. They're just words. Stability has to come first. It's the foundation for everything else. And you can see this so clearly in how he judged other world leaders. Take Gorbachev in the Soviet Union. LKY was horrified. He thought Gorbachev was reckless for dismantling the KGB, the very terror machine that held that massive country together. But then you look at Deng Xiaoping and the Tiananmen Square protests. LKY admired him for it. Why? Because he believed Deng chose order over chaos and saved China from completely imploding. So when you have this kind of tough-minded view on people and how fragile society is, it's going to shape how you think a leader should act. And that brings us to our third and final truth, his philosophy of leadership.
So let me just ask you this. It's the classic question, right? The one politicians always try to avoid. Should a leader be loved or should a leader be feared?
Well, Lee Kuan Yew didn't dance around it at all. He gave a straight answer. He was a huge believer in Machiavelli. He was totally convinced that if a leader isn't willing to be feared, if there are no real consequences for defying them, then their authority is completely meaningless. It's just hot air. He had zero respect for leaders who just followed opinion polls. He thought they were weak. He saw his job not as being popular today, but being proven right in the long run. He couldn't have cared less about being politically correct. He cared about being correct, full stop. At the end of the day, the guy was the ultimate pragmatist. He wasn't reading Plato, trying to figure out how to govern. His one and only guiding principle was a simple question. What will make this work? That was it. So if that meant banning chewing gum because it was jamming up the subway doors, then chewing gum was banned. If it meant forcing racial integration with housing quotas, then that's what he did. Whatever worked, he did. So you take all this stuff together, his beliefs about inequality, the absolute need for order, his whatever works leadership style, and it all builds to this one final massive challenge to the West. He thought the West's biggest mistake was just pure arrogance. This idea that our values, our systems, like liberal democracy, can just be copy-pasted anywhere in the world. To him, that was a dangerous fantasy. He flat out warned that if you tried to turn a country like China into a Western-style democracy, it wouldn't work. It would just collapse. He would look at the West, and what did he see? He saw societies that were falling apart. He saw us emphasizing individual rights so much that we were forgetting about the safety of the community. He saw a culture that had gone soft, that had forgotten the kind of discipline, what he called the iron in the soul, that you absolutely need not just to build something great, but to keep it from being taken by hungrier competitors. And that really captures his final warning to us. Power isn't something you inherit and just put on a shelf like a trophy. It's a constant daily fight. LKY never, ever forgot that civilizations rise and fall on their will to survive. And he was worried. He was worried the West had just gotten too comfortable, that we'd forgotten how to fight. So this leaves us with a really provocative question, doesn't it? The point isn't about whether Lee Kuan Yew was 100% right about everything. The real question is, for us, in our age of comfort, of idealism, are we brave enough to even look at his brutal truths, to face the world as it is and not just how we wish it would be, before it's too late?